I stand before you today not simply aligned with power, nor seeking to disrupt the balance lightly, but compelled by a higher truth, by the duty to speak for the voiceless, to speak for the fallen, to speak for Africa's moral awakening. For too long, politicians have hidden behind protocol, behind sovereignty, behind the might of their office. Yet when that power is used to silence the cries of citizens, it morphs into tyranny. It is this injustice, from bullet to betrayal, that we must confront. In the recent tragedy of Kenya's protests, the nation's streets have become a battlefield. Young people, fathers and mothers, journalists and students, united not by ideology, but by desperation, took to Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, and beyond, demanding fairness and a future free from economic strangulation. Their weapon, hope. Their demand, justice. But the response meted out to them by those in power was not dialogue, it was force. Tear gas, rubber bullets, water cannon, live rounds. The air, once filled with chants, now carries the echo of gunfire. This is not about politics, it is about humanity. When the state turns guns against its own people, it crosses a line no society can allow to remain uncrossed. The use of lethal force on peaceful demonstrators is not a demonstration of strength, but an admission of fear. It is the weapon of those who see dissent, not as a right but as a threat, and in that fear lies their defeat. Understanding that this is not merely a local issue, but a continental one, we call on our union, not as spectators, not as bystanders, but as custodians of African values, to step forward. We request an urgent, impartial investigation, conducted under African oversight, into Kenya's use of force, not later, not tomorrow, now. Delaying this inquiry would only deepen the wound and erode trust not in one government, but in the institution meant to uphold our shared ideals. Sovereignty is not the right to oppress. Sovereignty is the power to protect, to care, to empower. If our union cannot uphold this principle when our own citizens suffer, when our own nations falter, then our credibility and our purpose fades. We must choose today what legacy we leave for a continent that has been woven from struggles of injustice and clothed in the banner of liberation. Africa's solutions must emerge from African courage. We do not need foreign pressure to tell us that killing your people is wrong. Our morality is not borrowed. If unity means anything, it means we will stand for each other when discipline becomes violence, when leadership becomes cruelty. This is that moment. This is our test. Let every African leader hear this. Power without accountability is tyranny. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity, and failure to act when your people suffer is betrayal. The world is watching, yes, but more importantly, history is watching. To every citizen, every youth, every mother mourning her child, this is your continent. Your voice matters. Your life is worth more than political expedience. You marched because you believed Africa could be better. Let this moment be the proof. Act now. Let justice rise from our institutions. Let hope be restored, not by foreign applause, but by the beating heart of African unity, justice, and truth. Nothing in history demands more than the moment when the oppressed refuse to be silent, when courage rises from the shadows of fear and shakes the halls of power. We find ourselves in one of those moments. Across East Africa, the terrain of protest and resistance crackles with energy. Youths have taken to the streets, not with weapons, but with voice and conviction. It began quietly. Whispers of outrage, screens lighting up with the death of a blogger under questionable circumstances, fuel for the anger simmering beneath the surface. A man arrested, silenced, found lifeless in a cell. His body bore marks of violence that even the state pathologist could not deny. The death of that citizen, a teacher and commentator, roared across the nation. It ignited a fire in hearts too long burdened by corruption, inequality, and the heavy hand of repression. Within days, the streets of Nairobi and towns beyond filled with the chants of protest, born from grief but fueled by frustration. People marched against policies that suffocate hope, tax increases that betray the poor, abuses of power that erode trust, and a government whose response to pain is not empathy but force. These were no longer protests. This was a movement of souls demanding to be heard. Yet the response was brutal. Peaceful demonstrators were met with live fire, rubber bullets, tear gas that choked dreams. Innocent lives were caught in crossfire, vendors going about their meager business, young men selling face masks to scrape a living. One such man was shot at point-blank range, his body collapsing under trauma. His death became another symbol, one more name added to the ledger of injustice. This violence did not stop with death. It echoed through the disappearance of protesters, the cloud of abductions, and the silence imposed on media. News outlets were barred from sharing live coverage. The streets became scenes of violence shrouded from scrutiny. That suppression of truth is assault on democracy itself. Is this the future that was promised when independence rang out across our continent? Is this the legacy we leave for young Africans emerging from colonized pasts, expecting progress but subjected to punishments for daring to speak?
Hebers, this is Africa, pleading with yourself. We are not foreign interventionists. We are not spectators. We are the fabric of this continent, calling for truth. An independent, transparent process must begin now, not tomorrow, not after another life is lost. To those who follow online across borders, know this. What happened there matters here. A continent is built true when its people are safe, its voices audible, and its leadership accountable. If we demand African solutions, then here is Africa delivering them. This moment, cher, mark the birth of a new epoch, where leaders answer to justice, not only ballot, where sovereignty does not shield violence, where unity speaks loudest in defense of humanity, not in protection of malfeasance. History does not wait for timid promises. It demands brave action. Let justice echo through the corridors of power, as fiercely as bullets echo through the streets. Let it be said, when our own stood to challenge brutality, we rose, and Africa rose with them. What we are witnessing is not merely a local or isolated event, it is a reflection of a deeper crisis across the African continent. A crisis where power has lost its connection to the people. When tear gas fills the air not to protect the nation but to suffocate its voice. When bullets are fired not at invaders but at students, workers and elders in the streets, then we are no longer talking about governance. We are talking about tyranny disguised as law and order. How can any government call itself legitimate when it fears the very people it claims to serve? How can anyone speak of democracy while citizens lie bleeding on the pavement for daring to speak truth? It is a tragedy when those entrusted with the protection of citizens become the instruments of their terror. The police uniform should be a symbol of honor, not of fear. A government that responds to peaceful protests with violence is a government that has already lost the moral ground to lead. The cries of the injured, the silence of those who have been silenced forever, echo far beyond borders. They echo in the hearts of every African who dreams of a continent free from dictatorship in disguise. This violence is not simply physical. It's psychological. It tells the youth that their voice is worthless, their future irrelevant. It tells the farmer in the village, the miser in the marketplace, and the teacher in the classroom. Their rights depend on silence. The kind of fear corrodes nation from within. And what makes this even more unbearable is the silence from those in power. The attempts to mask slaughter with press conferences, to call injustice by another name, to spin oppression as stability.
There must be no room for such cowardice wrapped in political language. When the people protest, it is not war, it is democracy in action. And when leaders meet their cries with batons and bullets, they do not protect the nation, they betray it. This is not about opposition or allegiance. It is about humanity, justice and truth. The continent must no longer close its eyes to state violence. We must stand where the wounded have fallen and say never again, not in our name, not on our soil.
There comes a time when silence becomes betrayal, not just to one's own people, but to the very soul of a continent. The brutal suppression of protest, the arrogant dismissal of cries for justice, and the normalization of violence against citizens cannot go unchallenged. And it must not be foreigners or distant observers who take the lead in responding. The responsibility rests with Africa itself. The African continent must stop outsourcing its conscience to the world. When injustice erupts in one of our capitals, when blood is spilled by the hands of those sworn to serve and protect, it must be African institutions that rise first, speak first, and act first.
No longer can we accept or excuse that accountability is a Western tool, or that sovereignty is a shield against scrutiny. True sovereignty is upheld through justice. A government that murders its people under the pretense of order is not sovereign. It is rogue. The African Union, the regional blocs, the councils of elders and voices of faith must all rise to say, we do not tolerate impunity on this land. We will not look away when power becomes predatory. This is a call to stop hiding behind closed-door diplomacy and staged press release. It is time to open our eyes and stand with our people and not with the thrones that betray them. Justice must not be delayed until it is convenient. The investigation must not be delayed until it is convenient. The investigation must not be avoided because they are politically uncomfortable. What kind of union do we have if it shields the powerful and abandons the powerless? What kind of solidarity are we building if it cannot survive the test of truth? If Africa is to rise, it must rise through its own ability to hold its leaders accountable. The world is watching, but more importantly, so are our children. They are watching how we respond to the cries of the wounded and the grieving. They are watching if we choose justice or silence. The blood spilled in the streets of our nations is not washed away by time. It is only redeemed by truth. And that truth must be pursued with courage, with unity, and with an unbreakable commitment to the dignity of every African life, no matter how inconvenient it may be for the powerful. Africa's story has been one of resilience, but that resilience must never be mistaken for acceptance of tyranny. Across this vast land, from the shores of the Atlantic to the valleys of the Rift, people have bled under colonialism, under dictatorships, and under governments that have lost their way. But what makes Africa unbreakable is not merely its ability to endure suffering, but its growing power to rise together in defiance of injustice. The days when one regime could brutalize its people in silence while neighbors looked away are over. When a nation suffers, it is not alone. It is Africa that suffers. Solidarity is not an abstract slogan. It is an unspoken pact aux shared destiny, aux collective protection, aux unity, qui transcend border. It is a refusal to remain indifferent when the people are beaten for speaking, jailed for dreaming, or killed for marching in their streets. Whether the repression takes place in Nairobi or in Niamey, the African conscience must respond with a singular voice. You do not oppress our people without consequence. You do not murder dreams and expect our silence. It is not about interfering in internal matter. It is about defending human dignity. No African government should fear the outrage of its neighbors, unless it has chosen to turn its guns on its own people. Pan-Africanism means more than economic integration. It means moral integration. It means standing for each other, not only in boardrooms, but in the darkest nights of pain. It means linking arms not only in celebrations, but in resistance. Across this continent, young people are rising. They are reading history not with nostalgia, but with purpose. They are asking questions. They are connecting their struggle, seeing each other not as strangers divided by flag, but as comrades in a shared liberation. And they will not forget which nation stood in silence when the boots crushed the voices of the poor. They will not forgive those who chose comfort over courage. Africa cannot become free by watching tyranny devour its children. Freedom must be defended everywhere, or it is safe nowhere. Let every leader know injustice in one African country is injustice to all Africans. Let every people know you are not alone in your suffering. The continent is awakening, and with it comes a solidarity no dictator can silence. There is a new face to an old enemy. The chains have changed, but the goal remains the same: to subjugate, to control, to exploit. Where colonialism once used brute force and foreign flags, today it hides behind loans, sanctions, aid packages, and multilateral diplomacy. The institutions to claim to uplift now dictate policies. The banks that promise development entrench poverty. The voices that speak of democracy often fund those who undermine it. This is the reality of neocolonialism, and it must be rejected completely in all its forms. No nation can ever be free when its budget is written in a foreign capital. No people can truly rise when their resources are sold under contract that benefit only outsiders. No state can call itself sovereign when it must ask permission to feed its people, to defend its land, or to build its industries. Yet this is the reality imposed on many parts of this continent, not with rifles but with spreadsheets, not with armies but with interest rates. There is power in saying no. Saying no to dependency, no to manipulation, no to the smiling emissaries of economic subjugation. To reject neocolonialism is not to reject cooperation, it is demand a relationship based on dignity, not domination. It is a secret the soil, the minerals, the water, and the minds of Africa are not bargaining chips on someone else's poker table. They belong to the people, not to boardrooms in Paris, London, or Washington. This tool is a control names structural adjustment, debt ceilings, security training programs, emergency funding tied to political obedience. They disguise themselves as support, but function as levers of control. For too long, they have dictated our policies, determined our alliance, and stunted our growth. It is time to dismantle these mechanisms. It is time to chart a path that listens only to the will of our people, not the dictates of global markets. This rejection is not isolation, it is liberation. It is a foundation for true unity, built not on shared dependence, but on shared independence. A continent that controls its wealth, its weapons, and its war is a continent that cannot be colonized again. Let it be known far and wide, the era of economic servitude is ending. What follows will be rooted not in the language of our oppressors, but in the voice of a continent finally free to speak for itself. The strength of a nation is not just found in its history or its tradition, but in the energy of its youth. The future is not written by those clinging to outdated power, by those bold enough to imagine a different tomorrow. Across the continent, a new fire is rising. One fueled by young voices no longer willing to be silent, by hands no longer idle, and by minds no longer willing to be manipulated by the same old games of oppression and division. This is not simply a call for change. This is a call for awakening, a youth-led awakening that refuses to be ignored. In every city, every village, every university, in every digital space, the youth are realizing they are not powerless. They are the majority, the worker, the creator, the defender, and the dreamer. They are not waiting for permission to rise. They are taking responsibility for their future. No longer will they stand by while others decide their fate. No longer will they remain quiet as their nations are sold, piece by piece, to foreign interests and corrupt elites. The time for passive hope is over. The time for decisive action has come. This awakening does not come with violence, but with clarity. It comes with the understanding the silence is complicity, the fear is a tool of the oppressor, and that unity is the greatest weapon against tyranny. The youth are not simply protesting, they are organizing. The youth are not simply protesting, they are organizing. They are not just resisting, they are building a new economy rooted in dignity, a new politics rooted in accountability, a new culture rooted in pride and self-determination, and most importantly, a new identity rooted in African strength, not Western validation. Let's say you world, hear it clearly. The next generation will not be another chapter in the story of suffering. They will be the authors of a new story, written in their own voices. They will defend their lands, challenge their leaders, and protect their people. They will not be bought, they will not be silenced, and they will not be defeated. Those in power who fear this awakening should be afraid, not because the youth bring chaos, but because they bring truth. And truth, once awakening, cannot be put back to sleep. This is the moment. This is the moment. The youth will rise and they will lead.